Do you want to learn how to earn commissions of up to 20% by laundering millions of foreign dollars?
Well, we can't help you with that. But among the many IT problems we solve, Barracuda's email security solutions keep email phishing attacks like this from entering your business network and any valuable data from leaking out. Reclaim your network like 150,000 other businesses have. To learn more about stopping email-borne threats, visit barracuda.com/email.
National League Central rivals go head-to-head this weekend when the Pirates face the Cubs at Wrigley.
Swing and a miss. He stuck him out.
The pregame at 3 Eastern, first pitch at 4. Saturday on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app.
Coming up on the Best of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast, it's Steve Spurrier's 70th birthday, and Buddy Martin has a special announcement about the head ball coach. Tim Tebow signs with the Philadelphia Eagles. Plus, Barrett Salee makes a bold prediction about the SEC West, and we take your phone calls. It's the Best of the Finebaum Show podcast, and it starts right now.
This is the Best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Someone who has known Steve Spurrier and been friends with him a very long time is Buddy Martin, one of the great sports writers of any era. He's also a Gator. He's written a number of books on the Gators. The Boys from Old Florida. He also wrote Urban's Way, Urban Meyer. And Buddy, it's been way too long, and we got another announcement we're going to make here in a second, but it is very good to visit with you again. It's been way too long.
Paul, it's such a pleasure to be on your show and talk to you again. I was thinking about how far we go back. And it's been a long time because I was doing the radio with Woody Page in Denver back in those days, and we used to be on now and then. We had you as a guest star every now and then I remembered also you helped stir up some of that stuff about Bobby Bowden and what happened after the 1996 game in Tallahassee when Danny Werfel was massacred by Mick Andrews, late hitters, and you came on the show on that following Monday, and you called them out, and you helped stir up that whole mess. So you were part of that Gator history.
Well, I actually go back farther, buddy. You don't remember because you didn't answer my mail, but when you were the sports editor in Denver, New York, I would send you resumes, and you would throw them in the garbage can. Because you were big time back then.
Yeah, well, that's what happens through the years. We go back a long way. It's great to talk to you again and be on your show. Congratulations, by the way, for all your success.
Thank you, buddy. I really appreciate that. And I know this, I don't believe this has been announced, but we understand that you have just completed a deal. Tell us about what will happen next year in relation to Steve Spurrier and a book you are working on.
Well, I was very pleased when Steve called me last summer and asked me if I would do his autobiography. And we haven't been able to really announce it because we've got a couple of publishers who want to publish it and an agent who's working on it, but we've been working on the book since last fall. Last fall is not a good time to be in Columbia working on the book, as you might expect. So I went up there a lot. We didn't get much work done, but we've been together now 3 or 4 times, and we're going to be together again tomorrow. And we announced on your show today that his autobiography, yet to be named, but a working title, A Different Kind of Head Ball Coach, and by the way, I'm looking for suggestions if you have one, will be forthcoming to be published in 2016. And there seems to be, believe it or not, quite a bit of interest in the marketplace about it, and I'm really honored to be able to tell that story. As you imagine, you couldn't have a better subject than Steve Spurrier when you're writing the book.
No, there's no doubt, and I know I've seen it up close. I was the story takes way too long, but I remember you told him something years ago that turned out to be it turned out to result in a suspension of a Florida player. You guys go back a long way, and I know a lot of confidentiality has been passed back and forth. In terms of where he is right now, we had him on last week, buddy, and the week before last, and I know you alluded to it in one of your recent columns, but he was pretty defensive about those who have suggested that the 14 season wasn't very good, and that maybe he ought to think about doing what most 70-year-olds do, and that's play golf every day.
Yeah, and you know what he said about that. I saw the interview, and because we talked about you a couple of times, Paul, because you go back with Steve almost as long as I do. You're one of the few writers who come to Gainesville and gain access. Can you imagine that today? You're walking in the office, and before you, of course, were part of Game Day or whatever, being a sports writer, getting access to a guy in his office during the week, which you had access to. But we talked about you several times, And then I saw the program, and I thought it was great. I love that he came at you as he did, and I love that you came back and said what you said. But that's Spurrier. He doesn't hold anything back, Paul. You know that. And the other thing we learned about Steve is this. If you cage him up, if you knock him down, he's going to come back at you. No better example than the 96 game when he got beat by Bobby Bowden and came back and won 52-20 in the Sugar Bowl and won the national championship. So he doesn't lose back-to-back very often. He had, you're right, it was not a good season for Steve, even though he's put a good spin on it. Because, let's face it, when you win 11 games 3 years in a row, 7-6 is not a great record. But he didn't say it was a great record. He also just said it wasn't a terrible record, and that's the point he was making of you.
I wanted to ask you about that because I had a unique relationship with him, and I wasn't in Gainesville often, but I've sat in on meetings with him before, strategy, things that I know you have, but most haven't. But he has had these unusual relationships with several media members. I know one in Orlando, another one in Columbia that become very personal and very publicized. I don't know if that will be part of your conversations with him leading up to the book, but I was struck by that, considering someone who the media genuinely likes.
Yes, and it is a part of the book. And there's a background to it, which I found fascinating. Because, as you know, he hates people who he says lies. He is a warrior of the truth. You know that. His version, of course. And he has his reasoning, and a lot of it goes back to, get this, Attila the Hun and Sun Tzu.
Of course.
He applies those principles, and he truly believes that those two writers were basically out to destroy his reputation. And Attila the Hun says when that happens, you come after them. You come after the people. And you're talking about Ron Marsh and Larry Guess. Guess from Orlando and Ron Marsh from Columbia. I'm siding with the poor newspaper guys because we've all been through that before. But I understand his principle. And here's the interesting story. I wonder where it came from that he has such a penchant for telling the truth, and a penchant he gets on officials if he thinks they've got it wrong. He doesn't agree. He didn't say that he disagrees with the call necessarily. But he told a story about playing baseball in Johnson City. Actually, he was in Athens at that time. His dad was a preacher there, and he was 7 years old, and he was a bat boy on a team that was of 9-year-olds, and his dad was coaching the team. They put him in right field, and lo and behold, a ball was hit to him. 7 years old, right field, coming at him. He made a dive at the ball. He missed it, but you couldn't tell because he came up with it. He had the ball in his glove, and the umpire came running out there and said, "Did you catch it, son?" He said, "No, sir, I didn't." He said, "I was brought up to tell the truth, and not try to do something to give you an advantage to win the game by cheating." And that's one of the things that's grounded him by his late father. And that's how he's been all these years. In terms of the relationships, if he thinks you're lying about him, he is unforgiving.
And, Buddy, you know 1,000 more stories than I do, but it was about 10 years ago, and he came up to Alabama to play golf, and he as he walked over to me, he said, "You'll never guess who I played with the other day," and he mentioned the person's name, and I will not mention it because it is one of the best-known people in the sports broadcasting profession. I mean, just megastar. He said, "Yeah, I played with him the other day, and he cheats." I'm like going, "What?" and he said we were on a hole, and he did this, and I'm like going, "Man, I mean, I'll shoot a 300 before I'd ever move a ball around Steve Spurrier."
I'll tell you a quick story. I worked out in Denver, and I was did the public relations for the golf tournament for years, PGA Tour event at the beautiful Castle Pines Golf Club. And Steve came out with his son, Steve Jr., and Rick Neuheisel, and we played together. Now, I think we're about number 5, and Steve Jr. hit one up the left side in the rough. And Steve Jr. walked over there, and he couldn't tell if it was his ball or not, so he, twisted it over. He said, "Look at it," and he said, "Steve, you can't move that ball." He said, "I'm just trying to identify it." He and his own son can't get by with it. He'll call him out.
Oh, how much fun this was to catch up with Buddy Martin. He'll do the book with Coach Spurrier coming out next year, and it won't be that long before we talk to you because we want to talk to you about Urban sometime soon. You wrote a book with him as well, and about him, I should say. And, Buddy, best wishes. Great to catch up, and I hope to talk to you very soon.
And I hope to have a home-and-home engagement, maybe get you on my radio program down here, our Southern Pigskin Tonight Show.
I would be honored. Thank you very much for being on.
Thank you, Paul.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Lance starts off the next segment. Hey, Lance.
Hey, Tim. Somebody asked me, my boss asked me yesterday, he said, who would you take in the draft, Mariota or Winston? I said, I would take Amari Cooper. And I think he's the best player in the draft, Paul. That's just me, though. We'll find out in 5 years. I think he's the next Chris Carter, man. He's got character, man. You can tell by his language he's got good character. You understand what I'm talking about?
You bet.
And he said, but what about Tebow, man? I'm so excited for him because ever since he got traded from Denver, I just don't feel like he's been put in right. He's been the right coach to give him a chance to succeed, man. I know he had a chance with New England, but Tim Tebow can't back up Tom Brady. He can't run that offense. But I'm real excited with Chip Kelly because he's committed to the run. And nobody's better at the read option, in my opinion, than Tim Tebow. I just think it's a match made in heaven, man. But what are you thinking about it, Paul? You excited about it?
I really am. I'm really happy for Tim. He wants to do this, and I mean, I think if he goes and it doesn't work out, then he comes back and does whatever he wants to do. And ESPN officials just released a statement saying that he is welcome back at ESPN when his playing days are over, whenever that is. So. If that's what he wants to do, then but he wanted to play football, and that's the most important thing. Everyone has, all people have dreams, and his dream has not completely been fulfilled yet. And if he goes there and doesn't work out, then he knows that he gave it a shot. But I think until he did this, it would never be over.
Yeah, Philadelphia's got the most passionate fans in the NFL, and they're fixing to get the most passionate players. Well, I don't know. Ray Lewis pretty close, but Tim Tebow pretty bad, man. And I'm going to say this about Tim Tebow, man. In the fourth quarter, when he played in 2011, in the last 2 minutes, he had the highest QBR of all quarterbacks. I mean, when it counts, Tim Tebow's the man. I'm telling you, he's got clutch genes and the leadership that you can't run. And you put him with DeMarco Murray, I just think he's going to lead the rushing attack. But I don't know if he'll start. But I think Chip Kelly's at least smart enough to put a package in with him. Tim Tebow's that good, man, but I think he will make the team. That's just my opinion on Paul. Thank you for your time, bro.
Thank you very much. Nice of you to call. Let's check in next with Mike, who is in Florida. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Paul. How are you? It's been a while.
Thank you. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, I want to also talk about Tebow, and I want you to hear me out as well, like for a minute or so. I'm really excited about the pickup. I mean, what are the chances? My favorite team is the Gators and the Eagles. You know that. Whoever thought my favorite college quarterback of all time would be my favorite sports team ever. I mean, I'm so excited. I really do feel like if he starts week 1, like they're a lock to win the NFC East. I'll get Super Bowl tickets ready. I'm serious. He's the perfect fit because if you think about it, Chip Kelly struggles down by the goal line, and who's the perfect person to get them over that hump? Tim Tebow. Like, I mean, this is a match made in heaven for him. I mean, like, I'm definitely going to order playoff tickets like week 1 if he's on the roster. I'm so excited. What are your thoughts?
Well, I feel very good about it, Mike, and I think you just have to let the musical chairs play out. I spoke to a former NFL executive today, and I said, what does this really mean? He said it means that they saw something specific in Tebow when he came in 6 weeks ago, something they really liked. It doesn't mean he'll make the roster. It doesn't mean he'll make the team. But I think the indicators are pretty strong. You just don't bring in, I mean, this isn't bringing in some guy off the street who hasn't played in 3 years. It's bounced around. This is Tim Tebow. And with Tim Tebow, I promise you, I know what I'm talking about here. You're not just getting a player. You're getting a great deal of conversation, buzz, attention, something that most NFL clubs don't like. I think Chip Kelly is the exception. That's one reason why he is where he is today. Philip is up next. Philip, good afternoon.
Hello, Paul. How are you today, my friend?
Doing great. Thank you.
Good. Paul, I've always been an Eagles fan, so I do want to mention a comment about Tim Tebow. You know, I used to not like him, and I'll tell you why. When he always had that John 3:16 on his face, and he would always put God into the picture, it just seemed like he was trying to cover up for some of his deficiencies by getting fan support and coach support. And I think now he's humbled himself, and he doesn't seem like he wants to do that as much. And I think he's going to work out well in Philadelphia.
Well, let me say this. I mean, Tim is smart, but I don't think Tim really thinks in terms of that. He's a very young man who is extremely enthusiastic about everything he does. He's well prepared. And I think this is just something, I've told this story before. I sat with him countless times this year at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and we were on a bus getting ready to do Sports Center or game day, whatever, and he's watching ESPN and studying and calculating in his mind, is there a chance for me if this guy goes down or now that this guy has gone down? That's what he's thought about since he left New England in late August of 2013. He has worked out every day. He spent most of his time in California with coaching and quarterback gurus, and he didn't do that for his health. He did it because he thought somehow, some way, he would get this opportunity again.
Yeah, and I think it's worked, Paul. And a quick question for you. I know you're more knowledgeable, of course, of football than I am. Why do more coaches not use a two-quarterback system where each quarterback specializes in a specific thing? And maybe if you've got a quarterback having an off day, you've got a great backup. Basketball uses that. They use backup in case someone's not hot. How do you feel about using
It's a great question, but most coaches, they like one person. They don't like to deviate. I've seen coaches, Nick Saban included, by the way, Philip, who will stay with the starting quarterback way too long, but they have a plan, they have a system, and that's what they're trying to do. I don't agree with it, but then again, I'm not an NFL head coach. Bill is in Jacksonville, the hometown of Tim Tebow. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you, buddy?
Very well.
Paul, I just wanted to say, I'm a big Gator fan as you'll ever meet. I think Tim Tebow was the second best college football player I ever saw behind Herschel Walker, and this is from a Gator. But Tim Tebow is not a pro football quarterback. The guy he can't make his reads fast enough. When I would watch him at Florida, when he would go to the first or second guy, the first or second read, he probably completed about 75% of his passes. When it would go to the third or fourth guy, he probably completed about 40% of his passes. And frankly, I wish the guy would just give up on it, man. You know, the guy a minute ago who talked about him doing something with God, that he was trying to overcome deficiency. Man, that's the most asinine thing I ever heard. The guy is a true Christian, and this thing with football is just like a sidelight. He's made enough money, you know, between the ESPN thing and the SEC thing. What he's doing now is just a sidelight for what he's really got.
Let me say this. I agree with most everything you said. I think with Tebow, and I think everyone has something that's just not quite finished yet. And with him, I think he just believes in his heart that he can play in the NFL. Whether you agree, and frankly, most people don't. Okay, I mean, I'm not speaking out of school here. I'm just telling you what NFL executives have said ad nauseum. But I think this is it. And by the way, whether he may make it big or he may be gone in record time, but at least he knows that he has done it. And I admire him for that. At some point, most people wouldn't be doing this, but then again, he's going to get a shot, and that's all he's asking for. I mean, this is someone who was a first-round draft choice several years ago. So, I mean, he's not going in the front door anymore. I mean, he's as it stands today, he's the fourth-string quarterback on the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right. Yeah, I almost just wish for his sake he would just, give it up. And there's so much more, so much better stuff he's going to do for people. Paul, this guy is just destined for great things that we're never going to hear about. It's not going to be on ESPN. I mean, he's going to help so many people when he's through.
No, I tell you what, Billy. I mean, listen, we've talked about many things, but I mean, I frankly, I hope my bosses don't get mad. I frankly think ESPN was someplace for him to land while he was trying to figure it out. But I see a much bigger platform for Tim than being an analyst on ESPN.
But there's no doubt, Paul. There's no doubt. Again, I love that kid, man. What he did for Florida, man. Oh my gosh, it's just unprecedented. but it just seems to me it's like a colossal waste of time. And then all these people that, again, I'm near Jacksonville, so I've only read about 10,000 editorials about we got to have Tim Tebow in Jacksonville, and that might have been the worst thing. The media scrutiny on that kid in Denver was unbearable. What it would have been in Jacksonville, he wouldn't have stood a chance. But he's just such a wonderful kid, a beautiful kid, and he's going to do so much more than football. But I just wanted to put that out there, Paul, and thank you very much for your time, buddy.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thanks for the call.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Booger McFarland joins us from the SEC Network. Booger, of course, has been pretty much all over the place during the spring. He was in Missouri over the weekend. And, Booger, it's always good to visit, and hope your travels have been safe. What's going on, man?
Things are well, P. Diddy. What's up, buddy?
Before we get to your spring stops, I do want to start off by asking you about Tebow. You played many, many years in the league. You know Tim. You've watched his struggle to get back to a camp. He is finally there. He's with Chip Kelly and the Eagles. What are your thoughts on that, and do you think he'll make it?
Well, my thoughts are, right now every roster in the NFL has 90 guys on it. So, they're roughly, I guess, over 2,000 players. So if you're asking me, does Tim Tebow deserve to be one of 2,000 players vying to get down to the 1,600, I would say yes. With that being said, I think the struggle is right in front of his eyes. His ability to play quarterback has always been, a question in the NFL because of his throwing motion, the ability to throw the football. Now, Chip Kelly has an offense that's going to allow him to maybe not be as accurate but still play because of the running element. But in the end, I still think it's going to be an uphill road for Tim Tebow to be an NFL quarterback. And there's nothing against him as a person because I know a lot of people come up with a lot of hate anytime you say anything bad against Tim. Tim's a great guy, but I'm strictly talking about him as an NFL quarterback. It's going to be a struggle.
Booger, if you had to guess what the most likely scenario will be for Tebow come the early September when the NFL season begins, do you think he'll be on that roster in some form or fashion? And what I mean by that is associated or affiliated with the Eagles.
I think if they keep three quarterbacks, he's got a chance to be that third quarterback. I think if they decide to keep two quarterbacks, he'll probably be sitting next to you, Paul.
That's what I wanted to know, and I'm hoping that he makes the roster somehow, some way. Appreciate the insight on that. Let's talk about Missouri. A lot of people are, even in Missouri, are saying no one is giving them enough respect. That they've won 2 SEC East titles. Why not a third? You've seen them up close. What do you think?
Paul, I went into the spring saying that the East was going to be Tennessee's to win or lose. And then I started traveling to these different sites, and I went to Missouri. And I got a chance to spend 2 days and watch Missouri's defense. Their defense is going to be as good as advertised. It'll be better than it was last year. It'll be one of the best in the SEC. And with that being said, their offense, specifically at the receiver position, is going to be really, really limited because they got a lot of young guys. Overall, I love Missouri's defense. I think from a running game standpoint, the offensive line and Hansbrough are going to be really, really good. If Matty Mark doesn't turn the football over, they got a chance to win the East again. I left Missouri very, very impressed, specifically with Loudon Harris. They got a great chance to replace Golden and Ray because they got a defensive line coach and Coach Kulikowski. They can flat-foot rush the passer. So I left Missouri very, very impressed, Paul.
Let's talk about some of the other places you have been, Booger, and your impressions. You've seen a lot. What would stand out the most during a busy spring of visiting SEC campuses?
Well, I'll start with in Gainesville. I think, everybody's expecting Jim McElwain to be the savior, and he's going to be a great coach, but I think year one's going to be a struggle. I think his defense is going to be pretty good offensively. They're going to struggle to move the football. They're going to play a lot of freshmen. They're going to play a lot of young guys. I don't know if Will Greer or Treon Harris is the answer at quarterback, but those are the only options that he has right now. So I think in Gainesville, they're going to struggle this year. South Carolina, I think John Hoke is going to simplify defensively everything that Lorenzo Ward couldn't do last year. And so defensively, they'll be better. The problem is they're breaking in a new quarterback just like, the rest of the SEC. So I think South Carolina overall is going to struggle offensively. But as funny as it may sound, I think the defense is going to keep them in a lot of games. As far as Ole Miss, which was the other stop I made, Hugh Freeze is building something special down there. Their front four is, I think, the second best front four in the SEC behind behind Missouri. I think defensively they're going to be very, very good. Once again, what are they going to do at quarterback? Is it going to be Kincaid? Is it going to be someone else? What are they going to do with Chad Kelly? So many different variables at quarterback, but their best weapon is Laquan Treadwell outside. So they have to find a quarterback to get the ball to their best weapon. So I think overall the schools that I visited, very impressed with Missouri, very impressed with Ole Miss. Still some question marks in South Carolina in Gainesville.
I realize you didn't do the Alabama spring game, but it seems like not much has changed from last spring to this spring in terms of the Alabama quarterback situation. Booger, what do you know and what are you hearing in terms of what it's going to look like come September?
Well, everybody thinks Alabama's biggest problem is quarterback. I'm going to beg to differ. I think their biggest problem has always been in the secondary because last year, let's be honest. They gave up bombs over Baghdad every Saturday. So I think going into this spring, I think everybody's focusing on the quarterback. I was focused on cornerback, and I think Tony Brown has got another year on his belt. Humphrey's got another year on his belt, and I think those two corners are going to provide much-needed leadership, much-needed playmaking ability at the cornerback position. Now, at quarterback, Paul, your guess is as good as mine. Jacob Coker's going to get the first shot, and then you start going through a cavalcade of other guys. But overall, I do think that Jacob Coker has a little edge over everyone else, and it's going to be his job to lose in the fall. And, with that being said, I don't know if it wasn't his job to lose last fall and he lost it. So we'll see him come to quarterback position in the fall.
Great stuff, Booger. Many thanks. We'll talk soon. Appreciate it.
Always, P. Diddy.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Let's check in with Debbie, who, we're glad to hear from you. How are you, Debbie?
Oh, I'm making it, Paul. It's so good to hear your voice. And I just want to say that I appreciate your staff and Linda and all your callers. I have had so much love from everybody. You truly have a real family. And I want to say happy birthday to the old ball coach.
Well, how are you feeling, Debbie?
Well, I'm not feeling too well. I've got to be laid up 6 to 8 weeks. And I go back to the doctor the 28th, and they're going to look at it and see if they can't put me in a cast, but I still can't put any pressure on it because, I've got plates and screws, and I've got a hardware store in my ankle.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little painful, but today's the first day I've been able to get out of bed, and I'm mastering the walker. And got to come in here and lay back in the living room. And Brookwood was so good to me, but the only thing I said I didn't like was they didn't have the SEC channel.
You got to be kidding.
No, and I got on to them about it.
How can you have a hospital in the South and not have the SEC network?
Thank you. That's what I told them. I said, you mean you don't have the SEC channel? I said, somebody needs to work on that.
Yeah, listen, I'm not in the business of telling people what hospital to go to or what not to, but I wouldn't go to a hospital that doesn't have the SEC network. It's that simple.
If I'd have known that, I wouldn't. That's just where the ambulance took me.
People need to start demanding. I had this problem at a hotel in Alabama, and I will not go back to the hotel because they don't have the SEC network. And it's in Birmingham.
I told the head nurse, I said, you need to talk to the administration. They need to have the SEC
It is not
channel.
difficult to do. You just have to reconfigure your cable, and probably cost about $3.50.
Really?
And for the the $100 they charge you for a pillow and for a towel. Not that I'm a critic of hospital care, but the bottom line is that's the new rule. You go to a doctor. You go to your doctor based on whether they go to hospitals with the SEC network. There's simply no other choice.
Okay, that's what I'm going to start doing. I demanded them up there.
Yeah.
I said, y'all knew a halfback.
You walk in, even though yours was an emergency. You're in the ambulance.
I should have said, do y'all have the SEC channel? If you don't, take me to another one.
Well, there's no excuse for a hospital in Birmingham,
Alabama.
Not to have I guarantee you they had every other. I guarantee you they had every other stupid cable network there.
Yes, they did. And I searched for you and searched for you. I had the nurse come in, and I was so aggravated. I said, "You need to talk to
And that is
administration."
just to make sure I don't criticize the wrong hospital. That's Brookwood Hospital.
Yes, sir.
Debbie, be well. We have to go to the break, but thanks for the call. Call your hospital carrier right now.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Call of the day.
You're welcome to say whatever you would like. That's what this program's all about.
On the Paul Finebaum Show.
Larry, I'm sure, probably already knows the plan. What's up, Larry?
Hey, Mr. Finebaum, how you getting along today?
Pretty well.
Hey, great. Hey, old General Custer was a pretty good leader, too.
He was.
Find all that.
He just had one bad hey, by the way, Custer just had one bad game.
Right, just that one bad day.
Little Bighorn.
Hey, I never heard so much hullabaloo over a fourth-team quarterback since I myself went out for quarterback for the Emerson Bearcats in fourth grade. And it's just like my dad. These Tebow corners are like my dad. He always said, "Son, you're just the best one out there." I mean, it's over. I mean, he should be a demon on spread punt. I'll give him that. But I will just next time he turns that water into wine. I do like wine. If you give me a call, I'd appreciate that. Hey, as far as the spring game, I just wasn't all that impressed. I mean, Alabama had more no-shows. George Jones concert. I mean, there wasn't no 65,000 people there unless they were in visibility kept close. But Coker, he did. He looked like a man. And, unfortunately, he's Archer, man. He's a 70-year-old man right now. The last thing I'll say, too, I haven't listened much. And I just want
You're throwing some heat today, Larry.
Yeah, well, I felt kind of bad. I wanted to pass my condolences on to Hiram. I just now heard he passed away, and I'm sorry to hear that. I wish him Godspeed. And to his family, I just want them to know that my tears, like my beers, will flow forever as memories. Thanks, Paul Boomerson.
One of the all-time great Larry from Missouri calls. We do have some pretty good callers on this show. Some great ones.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Larry is up next. What's up, Larry?
Hey, Paul, how's it going, man?
Okay, Larry.
Yeah, I felt something weird, too, in that game. We got our ass kicked. That was pretty weird.
that does feel weird sometimes when you don't lose about once a year.
Right after 18 beers, I was feeling real weird.
I bet you were.
Yeah, I was a sad day in Black Rock. Hey, but you know what, man? Tim Tebow, he's a lot older now. Stronger. He's wiser. And my daddy used to say, you can't catch a fish if you worm out in the water. And the boy's got his worm in the water. You know, he's trying to catch another. And I think he's going to make it, Paul. I really do. But I'm going to be saying these haters just sound pitiful. I'm going over the same old. It's almost like Larry from Missouri. Let him run that yak. He's just like Charles from Reeltown and Darrell. Ain't nothing he can say good about his own team, especially Oklahoma. What about a bunch of zombies? My God, you remember back when he first come on the scene? He was running that yappadoo about big game ball. And what you said, hey, he's going to get boomered a lot sooner than you think. And guess what? And they've had that butt kicked so much that they might as well just not even talk about him. They're irrelevant, and he's irrelevant. And if you listen to Larry, Missouri, why don't you shut that big yap? Talk about something else. Damn, roll tide.
Man is next.
Well, you know, it's funny that Larry from Shelby would say that when it seems to me like Larry's from Missouri's team soundly beat the Bammers. Soundly beat them. And there's a lot of conversation about a third-team quarterback. I mean, has everybody got to go relive all these stories for a third-team quarterback? My goodness. Have you people not got any kind of life, keep up with anything? I'm not even going to tell you about the Bob Dylan show because it's not SEC. But, you know, I will say this. That funny feeling that Nick Saban had didn't have anything to do with that.
Hey, I'm in. How was the Bob Dylan show?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was great. You loved it, Paul. You would have loved it. The dude is cool. It's just cool to see somebody.
He give any Montgomery references, you know, being the home of Hank Williams and all that?
You wouldn't have understood it if he did, so I'd say yeah. I mean, you know, did
he say, I am here in Montgomery, Alabama, the home of Hank Williams and one of the great drummers of all time since Ringo Starr, the one and only I-Man?
He said it like this.
Blowing in the wind.
Yeah, he did that, actually. You know, the dude's got so many
like a Rolling
songs.
Stone.
Yeah, the dude's got so many songs.
What was it? Okay, what was his best song?
He did Blowing in the Wind. But if you hadn't asked me, I could have told you.
We're talking about Bob Dylan here. It's not like I'm asking about a one-hit wonder. The guy's had 400 classic hits. You can't come up with one song at the Bob. Or were you just puffing too much on that bog of yours and you can't remember?
I was 420 early. Here, Paul, take it now.
I've never talked to a guy that went to Bob Dylan isn't just some local schmo that got nominated for a newcomer of the year from the CMA. This is this is a Mount Rushmore entertainer. I-Man couldn't remember one song from the set. Wow, that's not good.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
Major League Baseball.
San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
The new college football playoff.
College football playoff national champion, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
You're home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
Always good to visit with Barrett Sallee of the Bleacher Report. More phone calls coming up in a little while. More Tebow conversation, as that seemingly has been one of the big themes of the day. Barrett, always good to catch up. Spring ball not completely over yet. A few more games to go. But at least in the SEC, what have been your impressions and what has stood out the most?
Well, thanks for having me on, Paul. I think the biggest thing, I think, for me this past weekend was the play of LSU's quarterbacks. They still have a little bit of a quarterback problem because Brandon Harris and Anthony Jennings look good at times, but also against the first team defense, they really didn't look all that great. But they looked significantly more efficient than they did last year, and that's a huge step forward because I think that was the biggest concern was whoever wins that job, can they complete more than 50% of their passes? And it certainly looked like they had a little bit more of a grasp of what they were doing, even though a lot of their stats were padded against the second team D. At Alabama, I think they accomplished their main two goals this spring. They narrowed the quarterback competition down to 2. That's all they had to do because when you have 5, you have way too many. 2 is just fine. And the cornerbacks looked pretty decent. They gave up a couple of big, pass plays, one to Ardarius Stewart, a couple to Robert Foster, but there weren't any blown coverages. And that's the biggest thing for Alabama. They looked like they were in the right spot. They just got beat by players who are really good football players. And then Auburn, defense still sort of a work in progress, sort of undermanned without Carl Lawson and Jonathan Jones. But Jeremy Johnson looked every bit of a superstar.
Barrett, as you begin formulating ideas, and you may already have many of your ideas because you have certainly been prescient with some of your predictions, but where are you right now? And I realize we're still a couple of months off before Hoover and then the beginning of the season, but looking at the West, give us your best guess.
I think it's going to come down to the Iron Bowl. I would probably give the edge to Alabama just because we've seen Alabama the last 2 seasons. They're still a really good, really competitive football team that had major cornerback issues. They didn't have to get significantly better in that department. They had to be adequate. And I think, from an offensive standpoint, the quarterback issues out there, it was an issue this time last year, and Lane Kiffin figured it out. And I think because you have Lane Kiffin in your back pocket, I think you have to sort of side with Alabama at this point because, like I said, they've got the right offensive coordinator, and the cornerbacks look at least a little more consistent, and that's all they really need to be. So I'd give the edge to Alabama. Then I think in the East, Tennessee is going to be the chic pick, but it's not really a chic pick because they're the best, most talented team in the SEC East in my opinion, by far, they don't have a lot of the other questions that a lot of other teams have. They have basically everybody coming back. The only two questions are offensive line, can they get better? But they have 4 offensive line starters returning, and those guys may not even win those jobs. And the one thing that helps an offensive line is time. And then can they get over that hump and become an elite-level football team? But in the East, you don't really have to be. I mean, I keep hearing people say, well, I'm not going to pick Tennessee because it's Tennessee. Well, then who are you going to pick in the East? Missouri? Because I can understand that because Missouri's earned that benefit of the doubt, but you can't use that same argument and pick Georgia because Georgia has 1 or 2 inexplicable losses every single year and a ton of holes this year. You're talking about cornerback, middle linebacker, the entire defensive line. They got to find a quarterback. They got to replace their top 2 receivers. I think Tennessee is the most stable team in the SEC East, and the second place is not even close at this point.
So I guess there's no interpretation of what you just got through saying. Tennessee first. After that, Georgia, Missouri. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say probably Georgia, Missouri. I mean, we did projected win-loss totals. I think I had both of those teams at 9-3, with Georgia having the tiebreaker. So yeah, I would say Georgia, Missouri, and then Florida. I mean, Florida to me is it's really hard to say they're going to do an awful lot based on that offensive line, the way that they looked in the spring. I mean, in fact, I may put them behind South Carolina at this point, just because you never know what you're going to get week to week and play to play if you have an offensive line. I think the number is. They're going to have 6 healthy scholarship offensive linemen this summer, and then when the freshmen get there this fall, they're going to have 12. So you're basically half the offensive line, and it's only 12 scholarship players are true freshmen. Now, one of them is Marquez Ivy, and that's going to help, but he can't play all 5 positions.
Now, of course, South Carolina had a decent season last year, according to Steve Spurrier. If you have him somewhere in the middle of the pack, what does the decent season look like this year? Because what was your projection?
For South Carolina, I had them at 6-6. I may bump. I still think that's about right. That's the kind of neighborhood they're going to be in. I think the thing with them is what's going to happen with Marquavius Lewis, because this is a defensive end that they basically penciled into the starting lineup before he even took a practice snap. That's good that they have that kind of confidence in him, and Lord knows they needed somebody to get pressure on the quarterback. So that's still a ton of pressure for him, though. If he can live up to it and at least be disruptive, that'll certainly help, because I think a lot of their problems, people picked on their secondary, especially, early on after they got lit up by Kenny Hill. The secondary was so young. They're talented. They're a good group of defensive backs back there, but they just got no help up front. So they're going to have to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback. I think they still may be in that 6-6, 7-5 range because, on top of the issues they already have, left over from last year, they do have a new quarterback. They lost Mike Davis. They really don't have an established receiver outside of Pharaoh Cooper. The offensive line is still sort of, all over the place based on departures and injuries suffered this spring. So I still think they're a 6-6, 7-5 type team. I just don't see how they're going to take a step forward and contend for the division this year.
Barrett, on the other side, you said winner of the Alabama-Auburn game. That could be pretty much every year in the SEC West, and you wouldn't be wrong. So after that winner is determined, what are the rest of the standings going to look like?
I think Ole Miss and A&M will be fighting for third and fourth. I think, Ole Miss, to me, everyone's going to talk about the quarterback. I don't care who the quarterback is. They're going to find a way to get good play from a quarterback. The biggest thing for them is running the football. And between the tackles, Jalen Walton can run outside. We know that. But Jordan Wilkins, Eugene Bradley, Akeem Judd, they all looked pretty good in the Grove Bowl, and they did it behind an offensive line that was sort of patchwork. They're still recovering from injuries left over from last year. Because it's patchwork and a lot of those guys are coming back, then that offensive line is going to probably be a strength in the fall, but it was a weakness in the spring. So I think Ole Miss may be one of those teams to look out for, because if they can consistently move the football between the tackles, that defense is going to be solid. I think Hugh Freeze can get the most out of his quarterback, whoever wins that job. They're going to be pretty dangerous. I think A&M is going to be pretty dangerous, maybe a little inconsistent defensively, but certainly, a team that's, on any given Saturday can make your life miserable. I know Auburn State's found that out last year. I think that defense will show signs that it's certainly adequate enough to keep them, competitive. I just don't know if you're going to see that on a week-in, week-out basis.
Okay, I haven't heard LSU mentioned yet. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said earlier, the quarterback situation, they looked better. You have to be a little more confident in them. But, will that carry over to the fall? At this point, you sort of have to be in the wait-and-see approach, not only with the quarterbacks at LSU, but can Cameron call a game with dual-threat quarterbacks? We haven't seen him do that yet, at least one that's effective. Defensively, that depth was a problem. I think in the spring game you saw it. First team defense really good. Second team defense maybe not so much. So I think they're looking at another 8-5 type season. I think Arkansas is going to be right around that number with Mississippi State, being relegated back to 6-6. And I think Arkansas to me is interesting because if Dan Enos can swing the pendulum a little bit more towards the downfield passing game. He doesn't have to do it a lot, just a little bit. Brandon Allen, I think, certainly has proven he can be a game manager. That offense is going to be really tough if Brandon Allen can at least find a way to pose the threat of being a difference maker.
Barrett, I don't mean to sound like Bill O'Reilly since I heard you loud and clear, but did you say Mississippi State 6-6?
Yes, I did. I think with that team, look, they're a good. Someone's got to finish last in the SEC West, first of all. And I think Mississippi State last year, the reason they were so good last year was the depth and the continuity on both sides of the football. 5 of 7 starters gone off the front 7. That's a problem, and especially when one of those guys is Bernard McKinney and one of the other ones is Preston Smith. 3 new starters on the offensive line, a new running back replacing Josh Robinson. I think they're going to be competitive. I think that their edge last year, the reason they were so good was that familiarity, and they just don't have that this year. That's not to say they won't, be competitive. I just think it's gonna hurt them a lot more record-wise than it would be, on the field. They're still going to be a pretty darn good football team. I just don't think they're going to be able to put it all together like they did last year.
Of course, it is the SEC West. And will Vanderbilt? And will Vanderbilt win a conference game this year?
No, they won't. That schedule was really easy last year, and they only won 3 games, and they were basically gift wrapped 4, and couldn't even do that. So this year, when you look at that schedule, Western Kentucky is no joke. I mean, for Vandy, that's a tough game. They have to go to Houston and play Tom Herman. I don't know about that either. I mean, it's
and they're also at Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, who plays a road game in Middle Tennessee? It's bizarre. And then I think the Patton Robinette thing, I mean, he was going to be their starting quarterback. I think they pretty much had settled on that before at the end of spring practice, and they wrapped up, it seems like ages ago. And then all of a sudden he retires, and it's sort of back to the drawing board for them. I don't know about that Vandy team. And Derek Mason, I think, he's a good coach. I don't think he recognized, A, how good of a job James Franklin did, and B, how much losing quarterbacks and losing Jordan Matthews was going to hurt that team when he got that job.
Well, he may have been a good coach, and he may be a good coach in the future, but if he goes 0 for 16 in the SEC, I don't know how much longer he will be the coach.
Yeah, I mean, that probably won't help the resume, that's for sure. I mean, that's the thing is when you get that job, I kept saying the thing that's going to hurt him the most is expectations. I mean, just 3 years ago or 4 years ago when James Franklin got to a bowl game in his first year, that was considered monumental. And then they rip off 9-win seasons in 2 straight years after that. And so all of a sudden, it's like even getting to a bowl game may not be good enough for Vandy. I think that's got to be where they are. The bowl games are really good years. In the rest, they're at least competitive most of the time and sort of just under 500. And it's gonna be monumental for him to get back there because it's not like the SEC East is getting worse. I mean, Florida's building, Tennessee's building, Georgia's extremely talented. Missouri just is Missouri and finds ways to win football games. So yeah, it's gonna be tough out there for Vandy.
Barrett Slee never disappoints. Always leaves someone home crying after his visits here on the program. Thank you, Barrett. Great stuff. Always enjoy it.
My pleasure, Paul. Thanks for having me.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Darren is next up in Knoxville.
Yeah, hey, Paul. How you doing today?
Hey there. Great.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the spring game coming up, especially for the Vols. Just to recap a little bit from last year. We were about 3 plays away from winning the East last year. If you remember, we should have beat Florida. I think it was 9-10. could have beat Georgia, one possession game. Missouri didn't beat it bad. I mean, we were close. We were on the doorstep. Coming in, we know the offensive line was struggling. One thing we know is we can't get worse, right? We're losing nobody. We've done nothing but gain, some more talent at that position. So we can't help but get better there. We have Kamara coming in with the transfer. He's looking strong. He's going to push Jalen Hurd in the backfield. Not worried about that. We're wide receiver U. We're solid there. Joshua Dobbs, finally, it's his job. He's ready to go. Solid. Great recruiting class. Unbelievable. Still got to compete with Georgia, obviously. There's no reason we shouldn't beat Florida this year. They should be garbage. Should be. Now, they still have athletes down there. We know that. However, South Carolina, for whatever reason, we've had Spurrier's, number ever since he went there. Thank God he finally left Florida because we needed that. But my one question is, what are you expecting or looking forward to seeing in the spring game for the Vols?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're not going to see a lot. We've had this conversation over and over again, Bear, and I just want to see. I want to see a little bit about depth. Let me ask the guys in the control room. What are you looking? Are either one of you looking for anything in particular, John included, in the spring game for Tennessee?
The offensive line, and I'm not going to do a lot of line talk, but they were young. Now they should have matured. They need to be healthy. I mean, get out of that game healthy and make sure the offensive line stays together.
I'm looking for 100,000 fans to show up.
Yeah, I would be. I'd be disappointed if 200,000 didn't show up.
But by the way, as far as spring game attendance, the Big Ten has the top three this year with Ohio State, Penn State, and Nebraska. Three schools who have had the most fans show up. So Tennessee's the last hope, and Arkansas as well. This weekend, yeah.
Yeah, I frankly, even though they're number one in the SEC so far, based on past years, I thought the Alabama spring game of 65,000 was more of a trend than anything else. You can look in and try to figure out, is that just fans just being lackadaisical, bad weather, just really not being all that interested, still hung over from the Ohio State loss. And by the way, if you're just getting off work, putting us on in the car or getting home, Amari Cooper was on the program earlier today and questioned by me about complacency in the game against Ohio State. He said, we thought we were better than them. We got a little complacent, let our guard down. Heard that movie before. Bobby next in Birmingham. Hey, Bobby.
Hey, how you doing today, buddy?
Okay.
I'll give a shout-out to my wife today, Paul.
Okay.
On our anniversary, we've been married 45 years today.
45 years?
Yeah, 45.
Oh my goodness! Well, long year. Yeah, no, I'm not anywhere near there, but that's a long time, Bobby.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a comment on old Tim Tebow.
Okay.
I'm not a big Tebow fan, but I have to describe Tim Tebow using that Florida Mayweather slogan: hard work and dedication. Then everybody down in Tebow, tell them to get the smartphone out and check and see when the last time quarterbacks on the Philadelphia roster threw a touchdown pass. Now I want to talk about Alabama. We'll be pretty good on this fall. Our offensive line, we got center returning, left tackle, two important position on the line. We're throwing a couple of post-out recruits. Then the Bird told me, say, front seven on the defense, best they had in several seasons down in Alabama. And they put a little pressure on the quarterback, back end will be fine. Then everybody talking about the record that Ohio State set for a spring game. We did that a long time ago. And as far as Saturday was concerned, we had 60,000 people there with tornado warnings all around Tuscaloosa.
Oh, hey, Bobby, come on, slow down. I mean, don't start giving me this. I mean, it sounds. The bottom line is this: Alabama is one of the premier programs in the country. But if you're outside of the South, if you're in Ohio, if you're in New York, if you're watching from way up above, you're looking at the crowd in Tuscaloosa. You're looking at the crowd in Columbus, and you're beginning to wonder which one is the hot program, which one is the program going places, and which one was yesterday's program. And I think.
Well, I'm gonna say this, Paul, and I'm gonna let you go.
Sure.
As far as Ohio, you made a statement. Ohio State said at the White House today.
Yep.
So there's nothing new to Alabama.
Well, nothing new to Alabama, but it was 2 years ago today.
Alabama
was at the White House, but not today.
Well, let me finish, Paul. Can I finish?
You may.
All right. Well, we will go back to the White House, but we've been there so many times. You heard of the West Wing. Obama built the Alabama wing. And when we come to town, Obama say, "What up, Nick? Hey, Alabama." Say, y'all make yourself at home so y'all know where everything is. I'll holler at you later.
Andy is up next in Ohio.
65,000 at the Bama spring game. What's Brian Denny's seat, Paul? About 350,000 then?
It's over 100.
Well, you know, by scale, if that's 65,000, then that place seats well in excess of $250,000. But, hey, I wish Tim Tebow the best. I hope he gets some good experience there. I hope he does well in the NFL. It's going to, you know, make him that much more of an effective recruiter when he ends up in the system at Ohio State under Urban Meyer. So that'd be fantastic. And, you know, I'm sure you enjoyed your time with him. You had your bromance and all that good stuff. But, you know, I'm sure he was there because of the way things were structured, that when he was able to get this deal, he'd be able to pursue it. So it would keep that door open. I can't imagine someone with his mentality would want to permanently remove themselves from the game.
Well, let me address that, Andy. It was known from the very beginning that Tebow had an option in his contract to go. He could go back to the NFL, and I think everyone at ESPN has encouraged him to do whatever he wants to do, and have said, "You're welcome back here." Whether he comes back to television or not, I think is I have no earthly idea. To me, Tebow seems to have his mind more on football than broadcasting football.
Yeah, I agree. And why shouldn't he, Paul? I mean, why shouldn't he? I mean, the window is very narrow there.
You better believe it.
But, hey, apart from that, you know, really enjoy hearing about, well, you know, we just thought we were better than them. So when they go into these games, we just thought we were better than them. And then in the other games, when, you know, they're playing the Utahs and the Oklahomas of the world and whatnot, we just didn't want to be there. We didn't even feel like playing them. Is that right, Paul?
Let me say this to you, Andy. I was struck by his comment, and for the record, before people jump too much on what Amari Cooper said, I asked him a question saying I had heard that Saban had told people this, and that was the premise for the question, and he confirmed what I had heard, and I can't believe it when you get right down to it. I mean, how does Alabama, after the season they had, they lost at Oxford, they lost the previous year, the final two games. After this being a season of redemption, I'm not sure how in the world you can go into that game with that attitude.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they really went in with that attitude, but, you know, you see where it all got them. So all the Bammers who are on here about that, we're going to be great, Paul. We're going to be awesome, you know. Enjoy that with Coker, you know. And ask me about how that worked out last year.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Rich is up next in the ATL. What's up, Rich?
Hi, Paul. Thanks for taking my call, buddy.
Thank you very much.
Paul, regarding these Alabama losses, why can't it just be accepted that the reality was they got outplayed and outcoached? Why does complacency have to come into this, or any other didn't want to be there? Because you had mentioned you'd like to hear what Coach Saban has to say. I'm willing to bet he's going to say they got outplayed and outcoached. So I just don't understand why that can't be accepted. It happens.
Well,
And
if you
it's not
remember,
like
though, he was very unhappy with his team's attitude the previous year. He told me one time that it started at the LSU game. This isn't the 13th season. It seemed to mushroom at the Auburn game and the Oklahoma game, and he worked the entire offseason with all of his psychological gurus and his staff people to correct that, and it looked like all year that Alabama had a pretty good attitude. Even in the Mississippi game, they were in the game. I think it was a better team. I don't know if it was complacency or not. If you remember, Amari Cooper seemed like he was missing parts of that game, and then so were the running backs.
Right. Well, I think the way they coached against them had a lot to do with it, in my opinion. Now, the other thing real quick about that, when you look at these losses, Paul, every game was close. When you think complacency, you think maybe they laid down didn't want to be there. Well, every game was by one score, right? The Oklahoma game wasn't, but they had the ball with a minute left with the ball in their hand to try to score. And then they got the strip sack, right? You mentioned
by the way, I almost got the impression,
with 7 points. I mean, it's not like they're getting blown out.
Well, no, I mean Alabama doesn't get blown out, Rich. You know that,
right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I just want to accept that sometimes you get outplayed and outcoached, and I think there's nothing wrong with that, and it should be motivating. Now, what I really wanted to call about, Paul, was I don't know if this went over my head or everyone's head. Did you really say that Braxton Miller, there's a possibility that he could transfer to Alabama?
Yes, I did.
Did I hear that, or was I with I-Man at the time?
No, you were with I-Man at the time, but no, I said that there are some people in Tuscaloosa who think there is a small chance of that. I'm not putting a high probability. I am saying it's under consideration.
Okay, small chance. Now, this is the same kid that's been tied to speculation, FSU, LSU, Oregon, and now we can throw Alabama in there, too.
I think so. And by the way, he may not go to any of those places, but
right.
I will put it this way. There's some people in Tuscaloosa who think that it's better than a slight chance, but then again, trying to guess Braxton Miller at this point is extremely difficult.
Right. Didn't you say earlier, maybe a month or two ago, that he's surrounded by, how do I want to say, handlers?
No, I didn't say that.
All right. Well, somebody said that apparently. Okay. And that decision would be obviously after the senior class graduates, right?
I believe so. I think they have to wait for that, which won't be very much longer.
What do you think? Would you, if you were Nick Saban, would you go after him?
Yes, I would.
And what about the ramifications it does to the rest of the depth chart at the position?
Well, I mean, I think to me it would show the fact that they were going after him would be an indicator that they're not all that crazy about Jacob Coker.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
I just think there would be attrition. I
hear where you are, though, Rich, but I've heard from people in Tuscaloosa that they the defensive side of the ball looks really good. And obviously you can pick and choose your players on offense that are outstanding and in elite athletes. There's a handful of them that are there. But there's also a feeling that there aren't that many. And the quarterback position is very much a mystery even now.
But isn't that a microcosm of the conference and the country in general?
Well, to a degree, yes, but I really think they felt Jacob Coker was a 2-year answer, and so far he hasn't proven to be anything yet.
Right. No, I agree with that because I watched the game too. All right, thanks as always for taking my call. Thank you.
Rich. Good to hear from you. Jerome is next up in Birmingham.
What's going on, Paul?
Hey, Jerome.
Hey, listen, I see the haters is out today, Finebaum. I see the whole nation is hating today. But let me tell you something. They hate on the best. Every time you're on top, Paul, they hate. You know,
hey,
like
Jerome,
yeah.
I hate to break it to you, but Alabama's not on top anymore.
How come we ain't on top? We don't care nothing about Ohio State winning the national championship, Paul. Whoop-de-doo. It's about time. We done dominated this thing, Paul, since 2008. It's about time for somebody to give us a break, even though I don't want this break, Finebaum. I absolutely don't want it. And let me tell you something. We don't settle for losing in Tuscaloosa. Everybody else in the nation like to lose. We don't lose in Tuscaloosa. So when we do lose, Finebaum, we don't like it. So, yeah, we're going to make complaints, gripe, complain, cry, all the above. Matter of fact, Urban Meyer needs to send us his psychiatrist number because I need to talk to him, Finebaum, because I still haven't got over last year. You hear me? And to listen to these clowns call in today and talk about Alabama and what Ohio State going to do, 100,000 showed up. Paul, so what? I wouldn't care if 150,000 showed up in Ohio State. Nothing's going to come out of the Finebaum. You hear me? Every year since 2008, Alabama has been in the middle of this thing, Finebaum, and we're going to be in the middle of it this year. You hear me? I hope Ohio State can get back there. You know, I guess y'all want to anoint Jeremy Newton down there at Auburn is the best. And we don't give a crap. The University of Alabama, we used to these haters, Finebaum. Hate all the way back to the national championship. Roll Tide, have a good day.
Thank you for listening to the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Tune into the Paul Finebaum Show every day from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC Network or on the ESPN radio app. Two of baseball's best go head-to-head in interleague action when the Tigers head to St. Louis to face the Cardinals. And that one is gone. The pregame at 7 Eastern, first pitch at 8, Sunday on ESPN and ESPN Radio.